This UX optimization report that breaks down two main things, the heuristic and the usability study. I'm going to talk through some of the methods that are used and intro both sections, and then we're actually going to take a quick look at some of the results to clarify how the formatting works. So when you get this, when you take a look at this, I started out with the metrics and an introduction section. The metrics are talking about what I'm measuring. What I'm measuring is performance, that's time on task, pass fail, issue-based reporting, any kind of encounters that the users come across for a specific problem, and behavioral issues. So if people get frustrated, pissed off, confused, or if they really like something, we can take a note of that. I also have a little user profile section right here, and that's just depending on the product that I'm testing, if there's requested for a certain age bracket, gender bracket, maybe an education criteria, and it all just depends on the product itself that we're going to be looking at. Then what we do is we come up with tasks for the actual usability study. And I like to do 7 because 7 tasks usually round about to 45 minutes to 50 minutes, and then I'll do like a 10-minute cool down session. Depending on the specific situation, it could be 6 tasks or 7 if the tasks are really short, but 7 really is kind of a magic number that I stick to. So the tasks are described here. I talk to the client beforehand about what are the main goals of their product, and based on those we come up with the task list, and I take care to try to word them in a way that they're not leading questions, that when they hear them they're not instantly kind of influenced to take a certain direction. So try to phrase these semi-generally, but still avoid phrasing them too vaguely so they're confused about just figuring out what the task means. You're not testing the task, you're really testing how they get the task accomplished. So before I actually do the test, I ask the participants to do demographics fill out, and here this serves 2 purposes. It's a nice piece of documentation about the background of the specific user. They're all anonymous, but it'll give you an idea of who was tested at this specific point. And really what it's helpful with as well is to warm up the participant. They're kind of getting into a mind frame of they're about to take this test, and it really warms them up to be able to participate in a smooth manner. So we'll do that. So this is a schedule. This is probably not something you'll see in a final report, but I put it in here because it's important to have when you're actually doing the study. I use a schedule to help myself keep on track. And there'll be even redundant things on here like reading, thinking. I have all the tasks in here, kind of shorthand, because I know what the tasks are going to be. So I kind of make a little note for myself instead of writing the whole thing out about what they're doing in each task. And it's just a really good thing to have on hand. You put it right next to you, and it keeps you on track. This is the consent form. You'll want to do this depending on what kind of product you're testing. You might also include an NDA, but a consent form for me mostly includes a clarification for the user that they're going to be anonymous, what's going to be happening during the test, the fact that they can leave at any point in the test, there's no legal obligation, and it also clarifies that any contributions they make, depending how you set it up, maybe you give them a gift card, maybe they're a free volunteer, that is the compensation, but they're not going to be compensated based on any kind of IDs that are generated or feature additions that are going to be making the product. They're really there to help us examine the system, but they're not becoming a stakeholder in a company where they're going to be benefiting financially from it. So always a good thing to have. So at this point, when they fill out the demographics, you go through the consent form, you explain to them what's going to be taking place, the amount of time it's going to take, you start the test. And usually I have these as tasks, and they'll see like one task at a time so they're not distracted. Now, as they're taking the actual test, I'll be taking notes. If it's possible, you can have a designated note taker available, and they'll be taking the notes and I'll be really facilitating the study. Sometimes that's not available, so you'll be doing both things. What's important during that process is you want to remind them that they should be using the Think Out Loud protocol. That means anything that comes into your mind as you're doing your system test, tell us what's happening in your head. Are you confused? Okay, I'm going to go over here because this. So it's helpful to figure out what's going on in the user's the tester's mind while this is all taking place. So once the test is complete, I take the notes by hand personally, and then I'll type them out. I keep track of the user's path of every page that they go to, if they completed the goal or not, and the total amount of time that it took them to complete the task. If they failed, I'll still put the time in there. I usually kind of have a margin of time, about 7 minutes, depending on the task. When I see them really get frustrated, I'll stop it because I don't want to really burn them out. And then I'll also go back and I'll write the comments. So it's kind of formatted like this: task, user A, their path, task completion, what they passed, total time. And then the comments is really what I jot down and I just kind of formulate it from my quick hand notes into a paragraph. And this is all observational. There's absolutely nothing in terms of suggestions that I'm including here. This is everything completely observational about what the user's doing, maybe some quotes from them that I think are relevant. That all goes in here. So those are going to be the 7 tasks. And then also in the cooldown section, so the cooldown happens right after everything ends, after they complete the final task. I'll ask them if they have any additional feedback. That helps the user kind of get out of the mindset of the test, and it also helps me because it gives me some kind of overall opinions they might have of the system. Some of it's going to be general feedback, some of it's going to be specific, but it's always good to have a section that talks about additional feedback from the users, and it's an opportunity to ask them maybe about the brand, any kind of questions that came up for you in your mind as they're taking a test. If there's a specific thing that you couldn't include in the task list, let's say, did they notice something in a header like a phone number or a subscription? You know, you can kind of throw this in here in a cool down session. This is kind of just a bonus, if you will, and sometimes it's very helpful. It's also a good opportunity to get feedback for the company in terms of brand, especially if it's going to be, positive feedback. They're going to be reading through a list of issues in the system, and we human beings, we want to also hear some good things. So if they have some positive brand feedback, it's also good to include it here. If it's negative, also good to include, of course. So this is the sus. I have them take this right before the cooldown, actually. I just the way I format it is I have all the tasks and comments in one section, but the subs actually takes place right after they finish everything. And this is a really nice standardized test. They've done it across all different systems. And what you'll have is a score once you calculate it. It's a little tricky to score, but you'll find a bunch of templates online where you can actually punch in the different numbers, and they'll help you out with scoring it. I believe, top of my head, I think 60, 69, 68 is the overall system average. It's going to be like a D or C, but you know, you really want to showcase this because there's going to be different grades, and what they even out to is generally going to be semi-accurate of the system. In this case, this was a 77.5, so it's above the average, but it's still a C, and there's a lot of improvements that can be made into the system. So I think I should note this because I didn't cover in terms of, well, how many people should be doing the usability test. You know, is it the more the better? Actually, they find that between 4 and 5 users is the magic number for the best bang for your buck for what you want. That comes from Nielsen. So if you can stick to that range, 4 to 5 people, you're going to catch, I believe it's like 85 to 90% of issues in the system. So that's very good, very strong. And then you're better off using that budget that you have to repeat the usability study after the fixes are made, or you know, save it for if you have a new feature coming out, rather than just getting, you know, 15 different users to or 30 different users to do these things. So at the end of this, I put the key findings and improvements. So this examines all the observations I made, and based on what I've seen, here's the top things I think should be fixed in the systems to solve the usability issues that I encountered. So I'll break these down, and I'll go into detail about what the issue was and how to fix it. And you know, this is very helpful because if you're just looking at the observational data, you can kind of get lost in it. But you know, the reason people hire you as a researcher is really the conclusion, you know. But I like to include it as well because they can always jump back to it and reference it and get better understanding of where these came from. Some people don't include it, some people go straight to the key findings, but I find that sometimes it's very helpful, especially if that company has their own UX researchers, UX designers, and they might want to flip through it. Maybe they'll catch some other things, you know, that they were curious about. So it's good to have. So, and that concludes the usability testing part of it, the user testing part of it. And now we're going into the heuristic evaluation. Now, heuristic evaluations are very different because now it's really on you to examine the system, and based on the issues you see, to mark down and give a severity rating to the usability problems. So I'm using Nielsen's severity method, and it's quite simple. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 0 being no usability problem, so you shouldn't even have it in your report really. 1 is a cosmetic problem, so any kind of a decorational item that's off, but it's not actually affecting anything in terms of the integrity of the system. 2 is a minor usability problem, 3 major, and 4 severe. So what I do is I'll have a formatted Excel sheet, and I'll do essentially a sitemap of the sections that we're going to be going through. And once I have that formatted, I will go page by page and inspect it, log all the issues. And I think I have a printout, yeah. So this is what it kind of looks like. It'll have the page listed, the section or component, subsection, or specific item. So this just allows you to give different levels of specificity within the page to quickly locate those items. If it's, in some cases actually it makes sense to actually just provide a link also here where it says page. And then the comments, this is important. It should be a short description of the issue, and you have to provide, if you can, a way to fix the issue. And the score is that severity system that we talked about. And what you do is you can do it for mobile separately. That's how I do it, and then for desktop separately. If the client wants for the tablets, you know, any kind of screen sizes that you want to include here, I prefer to keep them all separately. Another thing on that, you'll see reoccurring issues. That's totally normal. If you see them happening, for example, with all the H2 tags, you can make a note of them in a couple areas within your report, but then I always make a general section and I just put it in there as well. Because instead of just for every page, well, your H2s need to be fixed in this component, and this component, this component, just put it in the general section and address it. And then you can cite an example or a couple examples to where it appears so they can at least go and see what it looks like. But you don't necessarily have to say on every page that in every section that this is a problem, you know, because it gets really repetitive. Okay, so the last part of this report, so this is going back to the heuristic of what I do personally, is I like to, I don't really need this thing. I like to do annotations and screen grabs for level 4 and 3 severity problems. Do exactly as you have it referenced in the report, your comment section, break it down page by page and talk about this, and chronicle them, like actually order them in a list of severity issues. So on the home page, these are level 4 severities. These are level 3 severities. Here's exactly what they look like. Here's how you can fix them. And a screenshot. These are level 3s. And then, I think this makes sense. Some people do it a little differently. You list all the stuff for the homepage mobile and go on. Sometimes I do it a little differently where it's the homepage, you know, about page, and I do the whole desktop one, and then I go to the mobile. It's just client preference, it's your preference as well. Both work fairly good. I think that's about it in terms of an overview for user testing and a heuristic evaluation. Nielsen has a really good list of heuristic to look for when you're evaluating a site, and they can be a good reference point. They really go from physical objects to digital objects really well. You'll see that they originally feel like they were designed for physical objects in some places, but they're very strong, and I advise you to reference them and learn them really well. Look up examples of how things break those heuristics and what are the consequences and how you can fix them. And that's pretty much it. That's the high level overview. Thank you.